This is Self-Made, a Saya podcast.
Welcome to the blonde sandwich.
Yeah.
No,
I talked over your first line. I'm sorry. You have to do it
it's
again.
okay. That's not the first line. I was kidding.
No. I thought that was how you're genuinely opening it.
That's the episode name. No. Okay. Welcome to Self-Made, a podcast by Saya where we explore the messy, beautiful, and non-linear process of becoming who we are, who we're meant to be. Today, we're talking about something that most of us go through but don't explore enough. What happens when a title, a career, a relationship, or a life we once chased stop fitting? What then? Either by choice or by circumstance. I'm Nathalie, I'm your host, and today we are joined by two women I've gotten to know recently. They've both built meaningful careers, navigated big life shifts, and like most of us, I think you're still figuring it out. First, we have Rachael, creative director and MD of The Smalls, a global creative studio and platform for cinematic storytelling. Rachael is a mom of two, a two-time expat in Singapore, a former journalist, I've learned, and also someone who's really good at coming up with creative ideas on the spot. Brainstorming, a superpower.
Great.
Then we have Cilla. Over 5 years, she was leading marketing operations at Google until last year during the layoffs. She is also a mom of two, now a co-founder, and someone who's been reflecting deeply on identity, resilience, and what happens when a career-defining chapter ends. Rachael, Cilla, welcome.
Hi.
Thanks for having us.
This might be the most time I've had for self-reflection on anything in the last 6 years. So I don't know what's going to come through.
Self-made, accomplished. Let's talk about 2015. Why 2015? 10 years ago.
Okay.
Where were you? What were you doing with your life?
Okay. 2015, I was in Singapore the first time around. I was actually working at Google.
Oh,
In
wow.
their
Worlds colliding.
in the social lab. Having recently, that was my first shift out of journalism actually into kind of brand agency type work. Still writing at that point, but moving into like social content and digital content. So probably the beginning of what I'm doing now, that stepping stone was made then.
So 10 years ago, that was when I moved to Singapore for the first time. And so many people asked me like, why Singapore? And I was like, I don't know. I didn't do the traditional expat move where I came up with a role. I did it reverse. I was like Hong Kong or Singapore. And I applied for jobs in both and ended up getting an offer for a boutique agency in Singapore. So I've also been in agency for, 10 years before I was at Google. And I came up in 2015 by myself. My boyfriend at the time stayed at home. He had a great job in Sydney and was kind of like not ready to give that up for this adventure you've decided you want to go on. And so I came up by myself into a job that was, very, very local, if you could say, and it was a huge learning curve, a culture shock in a way. But I think that's where I learn faster when I'm thrown into those moments. I only managed to stay there for a year before moving on to another role, which only lasted for 3 months before they went through reorganization. So I think my first 18 months here were pretty turbulent, if you can say that. So 10 years ago, I was trying to swim, not sink, but enjoying very much the life in Singapore. And
what was your idea of success then?
I would say, really tricky. I mean, still in our mid-20s. I think we're both in our mid-20s then.
I'll take it.
What was success? I was starting to travel with work. I thought that was pretty cool. I think I went to countries I'd never been. I went to Korea and Japan. I went to LA. I thought that, I think that for me felt like someone's paying for me to go to these places. Like that's nuts that I have that kind of like value enough for someone to buy a plane ticket for me to go somewhere to do something else. I think that was pretty cool at the time. I now can't do any of that. And in fact, I put off travel as much as possible. So success then for me probably was just having adventures, discovering, that I had things to say that people were interested in hearing in a work capacity. And then I guess like maybe realizing that I was like okay at what I was doing and I was experiencing some success. So it was all coming together.
It's interesting, like listening to you, Rachel, talk about that, because there is a sense of like recklessness. Like 10 years ago, like when you're sort of mid-career or starting out, you're not really defining success the way we might now, like in leadership positions or founder positions. It's very much just like, for success for me was like I've always wanted to live in another country, and I did it. I think it's like saying, you know, defining your goals and then like doing it no matter what it is. And it's interesting how along the way, as you kind of get more senior, success starts to become more about like status or like your career, your title. And I don't think I recall back in 2015, like especially moving countries, where it was like, I'm going to be an account director in my next role. And that's the role I got, but it was more about like, I just want to get there. So yeah, it was like the success part, you don't really think about it in the way that I would think about it now.
Success is different, looks different for everyone.
Yeah, it is.
You know, where I feel like, maybe earlier in my career, it's the title, go on holiday wherever I want, having a corporate card, you know, thinking about that. But now it's different. Like for me, it's freedom of choice. How I spend my time, like that is so important to me.
Yeah.
Love that. Yeah.
Being able to choose where I spend my time and how I spend my time doesn't mean I work any less. It just means that I'm much more comfortable with those decisions being made by me. And I choose what's important and what's not important. And I'm sure there are brilliant managers out there who are also very gracious when it comes to that kind of thing. But when I think back to, could I have had children in my previous roles and do what I do now and be happy? I can't think that would have been an environment where I would have been okay with life at that time. So that's another thing. It's finding a new place to work or a new job where you can still honor flexibility and being a mum. Just find it. I don't know that many people who have that balance correct yet. So yeah.
Let's talk about your time at Google and what that meant to you personally. And as a follow-up, what was so hard about its ending?
I think just so the context, like just a bit about me, is like that moment when I got the job offer at Google. It was an amazing process. I was headhunted, like reached out to for the role, and then went through the interview process, which if you've been in a tech company or MNC, like is a lot of people you get to talk to. So I felt like it was such an amazing experience to get that offer, and it was really like one of those career defining moments. And then I had a great manager, I had a great global team, I had amazing stakeholders. It just felt like it just was the job that kept on giving, and it was a great company. And then we did some really incredible work with the marketing organization and our agency partners as well. And you know, the team grew. We got to hire and expand our team. So it just felt like everything was going, you know, the right way. And so I think, you know, when the global layoffs happened last year, it wasn't a surprise, but it was a shock. So I think it was always, you know, that by then my definition of success was to like continue this ladder at Google, you know, keep learning from the brilliant people I'm surrounded with and keep doing great work. And then I got, you know, asked to step off the ladder. And I think it was a bit of, you know, hit the bottom. What do I do? Okay, try to get back on the ladder. You know, reached out to my networks, tried to find other roles, which was really hard in this environment. I think globally, we all know it's just a really tough environment with the sort of technology advancements happening and companies not really knowing what headcount they need to sort of like work with that. So I think everyone's at a standstill right now. So it was just, it was a shock. It was kind of like, you know, you love your job, you believe in, you know, the company and the values it has. It all makes sense, but then your role's not there anymore. So it was just a lot to work through. And, you know, I still have my moments. It's been over a year now and I'm still like, you know, a bit nostalgic and lamenting. But so yeah, still is that sort of roller coaster. But
I guess you kind of have to sit in that, you know, discomfort for a
yeah,
little bit, you know, and like keep asking questions until you get a clear answer. But sometimes even with a clear answer, it's still getting that, you know, to the next step can be tough.
Our lives now is so different to how our life will be in 5-10 years in terms of our kids and what they need from us and how small they are. Like where I'm going to be in another 10 years is so different to now, because I just kind of follow my kids' lead in terms of what they need, and that maybe I shouldn't be doing that. But when I think when I think to them in 10 years, they're going to have their own lives, their own interests. They're not going to need me so much anymore. So if I did want to go back into this like more pressured environment, I could probably handle it then, but I can't handle it now. And we still have 30 years left to work, remember, ladies?
No,
so,
don't say that.
So there's plenty of time to figure out.
5 years, 5 years left. Let's go, Saya. 5 years.
I think when you've got small kids and a job, honestly, it's just a one day at a time. It really is one day at a time. I find to make a big decision now, I'd find that really, really hard. I would like love to speak to a coach and figure out what's important and what's not important, because honestly, it's all such a blur. I don't even know. So I think in terms of the moves that we were probably happy to make in our 20s, we'll probably be like up for making them again at some point. But right now, I think just being able to,
and it's such an interesting topic with like the defining success, because it's so true. Like sometimes we're just, even though you've mentioned that you're happy and you've got happiness there and you've got a great culture and a great team, and like that's what you want to create as the MD of the company. But it's also just like sometimes we are chasing that success, or just chasing like, and even if it is like spending time with our kids and things, like you're on a sort of like go, like today, like you said, day by day by day. And then all of a sudden you stop and things change and something happens. And you're a bit like, I don't even really know how I kind of got here, or like, you know, I was just doing it day by day. And I think that's what I've been trying to work through, is like, how can I be really like intentional and make sure that I've got these milestones personally and professionally that are not tied to the status of the company or like our title, but more like, oh, you've launched a company. Oh, okay, you've been able to take your kids to school and pick them up. And like, you know, I think for me, it's been trying to build out and map out those pieces of the pie so that I can feel really like satisfied and happy with how I've succeeded personally.
Cilla, you co-founded Property NXT shortly after the layoff. But, you know, as we touched on earlier, you still kind of held on to the idea of a Google-sized company. Going back to that, what made that hard to let go?
It was probably like the lack of choice. So I was thrown into a situation that I was ill prepared for. I mean, no one really is prepared, but I think, you know, I was underprepared and also just didn't choose, obviously. So I think when I was asked to come and help from an operational and marketing stance to build Property NXT, it was a bit of like at the time, and you know, my business partner knows this, it was a filler project. It was something that I like being busy and I like building things. So this is something I can do while I find the next corporate job. So I think for the longest time, it was I looked at it in that way. And, you know, whether it was naivety or arrogance, I was like, I've worked at Ogilvy and Google, some brilliant companies. I have an amazing network. I'll find something really soon. And didn't. And, you know, there was the longest time where it was like, is it me? But the more you spoke to other people, they were experiencing the same thing. And it just got to a stage where I just wasn't doing well mentally. My confidence went down. I was just, you know, not exercising, just simple things like I wasn't even like that sort of motivated to go and pick my kids up from school because I was like, I should be applying for jobs, like, or I should be doing this. It was just all consuming trying to find another role. And then I was building this company that again, was in my head at the time, a filler company, like a filler role and project. And so I did see a coach, specifically a career transition coach, because I think too often we don't ask for help in the right way. And what I love about coaching is it's you that comes up with the solutions yourself. Like they just ask the right questions, and I couldn't find it in me to ask me the difficult questions. So I got someone else to ask me the questions, and really found out that actually, like I said before, everything I'm doing for this filler role is what I really enjoy doing. I have flexibility. I get to make the decisions for a company and weigh in as an expert from operations, and we work with some great agency partners as well. So from agency management, and I think it was just like realizing that I'm actually really happy and successful if I look at it from that lens of like me doing things, having flexibility, and doing things I enjoy doing. I think what the thing I was missing was the status of the company. Like no one, it was, Property NXT, it was, 3 months old. No one knew what it was. And the salary, to be honest, having that steady income at the time, being the breadwinner of the family and now not, was just like a big shift for me personally. My husband it was never a problem for him. He was always really supportive. And so, so really it was like New Year, January this year. So it took almost a year to just go clean slate. I'm either all in on Property NXT or I'm all in on looking for a corporate job. But then when I realized like all the things I'm getting to build up my confidence, resilience, and skills is coming from what I'm doing now and not looking for a new job, it was just like the writing's on the wall, like go all in, embrace the co-founder life, build it up and learn, go from there. And who knows, maybe in 5 years I might be looking for a corporate role, but at least I'll be going in with a lot more even more intentionality, and I'll know more about that balance of success, that it's not just numbers, status, that there's a whole other piece as well.
Yeah, I think that's tough, like knowing when to hold on, push through, and let go. Because there's a sense of, am I giving up too soon? Do I need to try harder? Have I tried hard enough? In a previous episode, I talked about when it was time to resign from a company. So I asked myself these 3 questions. So I've used it, when I left my previous one. But even then, the answer was clear. It took me a full year still to put that in action.
Why does it take us so long? I'm not sure. Yeah, like there is we're holding on for so long. And then when you make a decision, you sort of look back and go,
yeah, duh.
Why didn't I?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the same pattern of, I guess, having a sense of direction, and the theme of today's chat, that direction shifting, the wind's changing, and you deciding to change direction, or like not in deciding, but at some point you make a decision, whether it's you're deciding to change direction or you're forced to change direction. At some point there's a decision you have to make of like, I can fight these headwinds or I can just embrace it. And I think that was what I came at a heads on. I think one of the biggest things when I was impacted last year was, what are we going to do? Are we going to have to leave Singapore? Are we going to have to move house? There was like all of these responsibilities that I was carrying that was like, what am I going to do without this steady income anymore? And I can tell you a year later, we're okay. We're still in the same house. My kids are still in the same school. We are still probably, to a lot of people's dismay, traveling as much as, a bit less, but quite a bit. We're still very lucky that we get to do all these things. And that's a combination of smart planning and prioritizing. But it's also like, I think what I realized in January was like, we're okay. Like you adapt, and, you can still, like the things that are so scary about I'm not having the salary, not having that corporate growth anymore, don't kind of like, once you've been without it for a while, you kind of realize that you didn't really need it, like to define who you are. And I think that's where I've sort of come out on the other side.
It's a relief to know, because I lie awake and run the numbers in my head all the time, and I'm not very good at maths, so it goes in a different direction each time. But normally does vaguely end up with like, we'll have to leave. Like if something happens to the agency, which is fine because Saya's helping us now, we're going to be a big success. And, you know, or if my husband changes his job because he's a teacher and our kids go to school, even if he chooses to change his career and we have to pay for the kids to go to school while we're leaving, if I lose my job while we're leaving. It's all I do definitely live on this cusp of like, oh God, we're gonna have to leave. And I really don't want to. I know I have a lot of people that have one foot out of Singapore, one foot back in, you know, the UK or Australia or wherever they live. But my feet are very firmly in Singapore right now. I have no desire to move back to the UK. Sorry, parents. And I don't really know where else I would want to go. I would actually go to Australia, but I don't think I'd be allowed in. The last time I went to Australia, actually, someone said welcome home and I was thrilled. So I was in like this surf shop and I was like, oh my God, he thinks I'm from like, Margaret River.
Did you say cheese, mate?
Yeah, I was like, yeah. So I do, that is the thing as well, is like worrying about the fact that we live in a different country and if that something goes wrong, you might have to leave.
Yeah, it's added pressure for sure. Yeah.
But it's good to know that you guys have made it work through smart planning. I'm not sure how smart I am at planning, but it's something I think about a lot.
Her husband is
yes,
in wealth
I have
management,
wealth
so
management.
if you need help,
Yeah,
he would
it's like long term, guys. It's good to have a strategy in place for sure.
Yeah.
my husband and I have 2 startups. We're fine.
Yeah, you guys,
I don't
that's
travel
really
business
flying by the seat
class
of your
anymore.
pants.
Oh, let's cut this. Entitled. Stop. No.
Yeah, I think the other thing as well that I'm aware of in creative and decision making and planning for the future is actually typically in creative, if you're not in the corporate world, getting sort of older and getting pushed out of the target audience that you're catering to, which is generally, you know, it was the millennials, now it's the Gen Zs. I'm very aware that I'm kind of aging out of the creative space in a way. And how many let's say, how many 50-year-old creative directors that are female do you know? Because I don't know a single one. And I can't think of any. And therefore that worries me because I love being creative director, but I have this sense that I won't be able to carry on doing it. I'll have to pivot more into the corporate space or the MD space to be able to continue working, because my passion actually lies in being a CD. But I kind of feel like I'm going to be getting closer and closer to the ceiling on that role, which is sad, but I don't see it's the pattern that I see every day, and you know, I am worried about that. So I do also think about in terms of decision making and pivoting. At some point I might have to pivot more into like business or the client services side, or some of the other skills that I have, I might have to draw on those and make that into my long-term plan.
And I think
Not
you're in that
redundant.
space now, right? So you're creative first, but you're also the MD. You're responsible for the growth of the company. How do you balance that? Make sure one doesn't drown out the other.
So when they said about being the MD, I said I can definitely do the quality control, making sure everything's as good as it can be, the creative, making sure clients are happy, because clients are happy because you do good work and you're organized and you're nice to them. And I can do that. I can be a manager. I can be kind to the team. I can have processes in place. I can make sure people are happy. New business, not so good at. Selling, terrible. The idea of having to like constantly justify or like try and tell someone that we're good at something I'm not very good at it. It gives me the ick, to be honest. Like sales. I'd rather be like, here's something I made. Do you want to do something like that? No, okay, don't worry. There's a whole kind of promising something that I'm not very good at the sales side. So yes, I am an MD, but when I took on the role, I said, I will do these 2 parts, but I will need help with new business and sales, because it's not something I feel that strongly about. I don't think I'm that good at it. But the other bits I can do. So maybe, and we are now having, support from Saya with new business, and we have a new business manager who's great. So sometimes maybe, I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but kind of just recognizing the part of the role that I'm just not interested in and not very good at, was, I guess, how I was able to take on being an MD. So yeah, I'm a different kind of style of MD in that sense.
And for you as a first-time founder,
Yes.
first time, You share that you're loving operations. I'm not surprised. You have an account management background. We like our hands on everything.
Orchestrators.
Yes. Anything else, like anything surprising that you've learned about yourself since founding this company?
Yeah. I mean, I spoke about this on our podcast as well. Like, I invest in property, but I'm not a specialist in property by any means. And working and building a company that advises on property investment, you kind of have to really ramp up quickly on that knowledge and really like try to absorb a lot. And what I've learned over time, even just being at agency, at Google, and here now, like, even though I work in a very specific industry as a founder, like what we do, there's still I'm a generalist, and it's like I'm very comfortable, and I find it very easy to go sort of 3 layers into a topic, 3 or 4 layers into a topic, and get comfortable with it to talk about it. And you have to do that in agency, right? You have to all of a sudden know about a finance client or an FMCG client or an insurance client. Like, all of a sudden you've got to kind of really adapt and pivot really quickly. And I've noticed that it's been the same approach with Property Next, where I'm surprised at how quickly I've been able to ramp up into an industry that I've had no exposure to aside from personal experience. When you're at a big company, you tend to feel like a cog in a wheel. Like, you give your opinions, but it's not always actioned, and it's not always, received in the way that you may have wanted it to go, and you're not getting to where you want to. When you're a founder, you sort of say, let's try this, and you get to try it. And you just get to get it done. And I think for me, that I've realized that is so much more satisfying. Like, just trying it might not be right, than sort of trying to, tick off your KPIs for getting ready for your performance review, I suppose. So yeah, there's just been that approach to founding. One of the things I struggle with from corporate to co-founding is the self-motivation part, to be honest. Yeah. I'm an extrovert. I get my energy off other people. And when I spend some days, I'm so lucky I'm a co-founder, because it's like I have Luke that I can bounce ideas off, and we have quite a tight knit of the board members where we can also bounce ideas off. So, but it's like not what I had when I was, at Google with a team sitting around me, and we really got to and stakeholders sitting around me. And, that sort of, I find more energizing than working for myself. But again, I'm finding ways and learning of change your environment, change your approach to combat it. Because again, it's a decision I have to make, that I decided to give it my all. And yes, there are days where I'm by myself all day and it's a bit draining, but what can you do to change it? And that was again what my coach said to me, was like, why? Because I was a bit like, I'm by myself a lot. Like I work by myself a lot. And she was like, why don't you fill up your bucket not in work for that extrovert part of you, right? Like, why don't you find other ways to fill that bucket? And I was like, oh, so now I do like a women's friend working lunch every 2 months with women I know, because I selfishly like to socialize, and I love connecting people. And that's what I used to love about my job at Google. It was very much about connecting the cross-functional teams. And so I'm like, well, I'll just do it for my personal self. Like, again, detaching it from why does it have to be a job that fulfills that need for me? Why can I not find it somewhere else? So that's something I discovered as well. This area that it's not always, you can't just rely on a job to give you everything you need.
And Rachael, you mentioned you prefer working with women. So when you're, for the films, you tend to pick female directors, visual artists, collaborators. Aside from the obvious, why is that?
We're a female founding company. We're a female run company. We've always had a female senior exec team at the Smalls. So that is something I'm very grateful for. We're in a unique position where the Smalls was born as a film festival. So the result of we're a bit different from a normal agency in that we have a huge community of different filmmakers and independent creatives, because we have this film festival, and every year we have that here in Singapore and in London. And as a result of that, we have all these amazing independent talents. So this makes up our community. And then we the Smalls agency side was born because they started to connect independent talents with brands. And then the kind of creative studio was a result of adding value to that process, because a lot of our community members haven't worked with brands before, or, have different strengths and weaknesses, whether they need help with timeline support or, budgeting or scripting or whatever that is. So we work with the community in that sense. And so, I'm in a unique position where I can champion women in the creative community. So I will always put forward women as part of shortlists. And if I have the choice myself, I do generally gravitate towards women. Yeah. As a female in creative, there's not that many of us. I don't know what the stats are these days, but like it was something like 20% of creative directors are female the last time I looked up in 1963. So I think
when you were born.
Yeah. So it's an ethical decision, but it is also a process decision, I have to say.
We talk about, success, ambition, right? When I think about it now, it's more about how do I make space for the things that matter to me? How do I protect this? We talk about success, happiness. Right now, I'm in a, very happy space or phase in my life. And a lot of the things that I do, how I interact with others, the things that I'm building is about that. How do I remain in this space? But being conscious of, things could change. A lot of it is based on where our kids are at this point, in our lives. So I have an 8-year-old and an almost 5-year-old. And every day I think about how do I show up that I am setting a good example for my children. Even when I play tennis, it's for them to see your mom is a pro athlete. Woo! You guys, you both have 2 boys, right?
Yes.
They're still young. I mean, they're a little bit younger than my kids, but how do you envision, that conversation one day, probably soon, about, pressure from society and dealing with transitions in life? How do you imagine that conversation to go?
For me, I did the positive intelligence saboteurs test. I don't know if you've done it, but it talks about, instead of your mind serving you, your mind sabotaging you. And they talk about there's basically 10 agents of self-sabotage. My top one is people pleaser. So I am acutely aware that I have people pleasing tendencies, and I really want to make sure that and that's every time you define your success, it's how other people determine you are successful, not how you do it. I really want to make sure my kids can flip that narrative. So little things, and I'm sure every parent here tries it, and it's really, really hard. It's easier said than done. But instead of saying I'm so proud of you, you kicked that goal, it's more like, how do you feel about kicking that goal? It's just trying to change the question a bit. So their interpretation of how they felt in that moment when they kicked the goal comes first. Then it's, Mummy's so proud of you, or, and it's really hard because I am so proud of him and I want him to know. But I also want to make sure he doesn't put his self-worth in my opinion and how I see him. So they're still young and I'm learning and they're still learning, but I think that's one thing I really want to be conscious about when it comes to making sure they are not looking for external validation for success. It comes intrinsically first.
Oh, wow. That was a really good answer. And I'm going to learn from that myself. It's hard. They're growing so quickly. And the fact that we have to think about all of these things is so overwhelming, because they've just felt like tiny, toddlers and little bags of potatoes for so long that the idea that their minds are being molded already is quite scary. And I definitely see it with my 6-year-old. He does define himself by what others think of him and say, and he will shapeshift according to who he's with. And I can see that happening. And I'm not so much like that. I don't care so much about what other people think, that I find it difficult because I'm still learning what to say to him in terms of what makes you happy and what do you want to do. And he's such a butterfly, and socially, and even the way that he plays and the sports that he does, it's hard to pin down where his true interests lie. Whereas my little one is so clearly, he knows exactly what he wants, how he wants it, verbalizes everything. It's easier to support him in a way, because he has clear goals. So I think it's going to be interesting with my eldest, because he and I are quite different. And that's why I will just continue asking you what you do.
But that's, I think it's just, and you said it before, like it's just showing up is enough as well, like being present, being there. And it's something we all know, but we all take for granted, that we actually can pick our kids up and can spend that time. So, let's be easy on ourselves of not trying to overthink too much. But I think just sometimes just being there and listening to them in those moments. And guiding them as a reactive measure, not necessarily a premeditated response, is sometimes the best thing.
This is the thing. And I think like my mum worked, but not in the very early years. And I do always remember her being around. And I do want that for my kids as well. I want them to feel like I'm there. But it's hard because I am also working, 50 hours a week. So it's how do I find time how do I ensure that they don't feel the pressures of my job whilst being around? And sometimes I do have to say to them, like, Mummy's got to go to the office now, and I do have a call, and this is the one where the door has to be shut. I always just feel so bad doing that, and I don't know why, but I think it's because I didn't see it when I was growing up, and my dad worked in an office, obviously, so he was away, and so I feel guilty whenever I'm in the office with the door shut. But perhaps they're learning. Oh gosh. But perhaps they're learning positive things from seeing me going off and working, because they know that Mummy works, and they think I go in my office and get given money because they're like, oh, did you get the money?
Oh, I wish.
Yeah. Did you get the cash? So I think it's also they're growing up in a different way to how I did. So it's just trying to take all the positives from my childhood whilst all the differences and making sure that it all kind of weighs up. But yeah, that's like being able to pick them up from school, and ultimately if something happens, I am always there. I work from home. I quite like being on because I feel like life is so chaotic that little time when no one is speaking to me is quite precious. So, but I am always there, you just have to open the door or shout. Yeah. So, and I think just one of the things I am finding now is that I am going to have to start traveling a little bit for work. And I find that really difficult. I did my first trip to London for a shoot, and I only went for 3 days because I know it was I destroyed my body in the process, but I felt so bad going. I felt so guilty, and I stayed for one extra night after the shoot to see my friends, and I felt so guilty the whole time.
That's just mom guilt.
I was going to say, and I don't is it roles reversed? I just wish sometimes we weren't so hard on ourselves.
Yeah. Well, Rachael, Cilla, thank you for joining. Cheers.
Cheers.
Water.
Cheers. Cheers. This should definitely be wine. Can we pretend that it is?